and it allows for the full expression of the endocannabinoid system. Now, as we
Nice.
get older, or if we're under an inordinate amount of stress, now, anandamide is called the bliss endocannabinoid because it comes from the Sanskrit word ananda, which means bliss. So
Mhm.
it's the bliss endocannabinoid. That's how you're supposed to feel. So as we get older, we produce less endocannabinoids. So for this reason, we need cannabinoids from the outside or exogenous from
Mhm.
outside in to work on these receptors.
She got a lot of love, yeah, that's for sure. Got music and movies, and friends and medicine. Yeah, is the show for me and you, the one you love to listen to. And ooh, you got your friends, see it through. See, 'cause laughter is medicine too. Said it's medicine too, babe.
Welcome to the Wendy Love Ed Show, brought to you by Kara's Healthcare and the Relevant app.
We don't dispense medical advice, and all your health choices are your own.
Yes, and the opinions expressed on the show are not necessarily those of our producer, A-Edge Productions.
This is season 6, episode 7. Am I depressed, and what can I do about it? I'm Wendy Love Edge, and this is my co-host, Branden Lee. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing very good. I'm staying even. I'm not depressed.
Good.
But I think we're all, as you talk about this, I think everyone has gone through what you consider depression, and man, the last
Mhm.
few years might just be everyone collectively.
Right. It's been a tough couple of years, and depression is really prevalent anyway. And then add to it everything, all the changes everybody's had to go through, and the suffering and the illness and the loss. It's not easy.
Yeah, and I want to let everyone know from the bat, you're not alone. I think a
Mhm.
lot of people, when you get in depression, it kind of gets dark and a lot of focus on yourself and kind of wondering what's going on. But understand that everyone, I say everyone that lives a long life goes through things like this. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm pretty excited to see some ways that we can really help people out and help ourselves out with these ways of
Mhm.
tools to help with depression.
Yes, absolutely. Later in the show, I talked with Dr. Rosado about, the prevalence of it, and what it is, and medications, and of course cannabis. But really wanted to have a discussion with you about self-help tools, things that you can do for yourself, things that I do for myself too, and really give people news they can use for this illness.
I agree. And there's so many things that you can utilize, but sometimes when you're in the darkness of depressions, it's some of these things it's really hard to even start. So
Mhm.
that is the first thing to do, is taking those first steps and picking yourself up, as we talk about all the time,
Mhm.
and dusting yourself off and taking those steps to make yourself feel better.
Right, absolutely. And so I found a blog, Intrepid Mental Health blog, and they had 9 self-help solutions. So I thought maybe we could go through some of those.
Yeah.
I added another one to it, which you can probably guess what it is, but
I'm gonna
uh,
guess, Wendy. I'm gonna guess.
but the first thing, the first couple of things are things we talk about all the time, getting some exercise, getting adequate sleep, um, avoiding things that can cause depression, like alcohol.
Yeah,
You know.
alcohol is literally called a depressant for
Mhm.
a reason. It really
Yes.
does. It hits your mood in a different way, and I think honestly, the older that I get, the more it really affects my body.
Mhm.
So,
I
my
agree.
hangovers last 2 days instead of a few
Mhm.
hours.
Right. Yeah, I
It's a
kind of
routine.
somewhere, I think in my mid 40s, I was kind of like, this isn't really fun anymore for me. Like, and I just didn't like the way it made me feel. So I don't really partake very often. I
Yeah.
might occasionally, but it is a depressant, so it's something to think about. Um,
Yes.
one of the things on the list was to challenge negative thoughts. And I think this is really important because when you're feeling a little low or things aren't going so well, you can hear lots of negative thoughts in your head.
Oh
you know,
yeah. Oh yeah.
yes, that little voice that's not so pleasant.
Yeah.
But really take a moment and instead of accepting it, challenge it and turn it around. Have you ever tried that?
I definitely have. I mean, having days where you don't want to get out of bed or days where you kind of feel really down or some things are happening in your life, you just don't want to even get up out of bed or open your eyes.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think having some positive thoughts of, okay, let's do this, even talking to yourself just to make it to that next moment
Mhm.
is really big. And so yeah, I do think that having that positive thought, at least not just super happy we
Right.
talk puking puppies and rainbows,
Right.
but
Right.
more of just being positive and some affirmations for yourself to get through the thing you're
Right.
going.
Yeah, and like if your negative thought is, I never do well at work, really challenge that and remind yourself the times that you did do a good job or you did well,
Right,
you know.
right, and challenge yourself always.
Hmm.
If that job is not fulfilling in a certain way for a certain amount of time, maybe it's something that is holding you back from doing something you really want to do.
That's a good
Sometimes the
point.
things,
Mhm.
yeah, sometimes the things in our lives make us depressed and we just keep on doing them. you
Right,
know, it comes to
right,
alcohol as well. People think, oh, I'm so depressed, but then you keep drinking and
right.
are more depressed, or your job is a dead end or it doesn't feel right. And sometimes we get in these things ourselves and kind of convince ourselves that we got to keep doing them, you know?
Right. And that's one of the things on the list, Brandon. Change your routine.
Yes.
If you kind of can get in that rut and you keep doing things and you're not happy, but you just keep doing the same routine, and just one little shift can change everything, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and it can be anything from the way you're waking up in the morning, doing a little bit of yoga, setting some time out for yourself and your body,
Mhm.
um, making time for friends. I know that sounds weird, but people put their nose to the grindstone and they don't think about hanging out with your friends, like having some good
Yes.
times with the people you love,
Right.
and carving that time out for people and for moments.
Absolutely. And in that, one of the things on the list is humor. And
Yes,
we've talked about that before. It is really important to have humor in your life. And maybe if you're not making time for friends and people who love you, you're not enjoying a few laughs either, you know.
right. And I think you need to monitor that, how much
Mhm.
you are enjoying your times and when you do enjoy things. So yeah, definitely humor is everything. We talked about this in the past episodes that
Yeah.
humor can literally heal you sometimes,
Yes.
mentally put you in a better state.
Yes, for sure. Another thing on the list is drinking water. And when you drink enough water, it really clears the toxins out of your body. And that's so important. It can affect your thinking if you're dehydrated at all. So it's
I
simple things
agree.
like that. Add a few more cups of water during the day, and you might
Chug a
just feel a
lug.
little
I mean,
better.
just drink as much as you can. My sister drinks just Dr. Pepper, and
Oh
I'm like, come
no.
on, drink some water.
Yes.
You got to get used to that. Your body is mostly that, and giving your body what it is and what it
Mhm.
craves, which is water a lot of the time. Uh,
Right.
very, very helpful. Wake up in the morning and do that. That's part of those
Mhm.
new routines you may be able to add.
For sure. It really dehydration causes all kinds of cognitive problems. We see it in the elderly frequently. We see, but it can affect anyone really. So it's a really easy thing that you can add. Another thing on the list was actually creating a routine. So some people have, need to shift their routine. And some people are just all over the place and don't have one. And
Yes.
that can kind of bring you down because you don't know what you should be doing, or, it just doesn't
Right.
feel good.
Yeah, you feel out of place, and scheduling. Oh my God, Wendy, scheduling is everything for me.
Mhm.
Um, since I do have a lot on my plate, when I do all these things that I do, having that schedule and having that routine is everything for me. So if I get out of whack, if I do have one of those party nights or things
Uh-huh.
like that, it can just throw the whole week for a loop. And so yeah, routine was, I mean, a big starting block for having success in what you're doing is just making sure that you're scheduled and having fun things to do too. Not everything on your schedule has to be a, a task or a
Right.
bad thing. So
Uh-huh.
plan those things for good times as well as your, things that you have to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we can get stuck in the, work, 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 or family obligations, and not have it. So putting it in your schedule could make it more likely that you'll take that time.
Yeah, schedule that like you would a date with someone or anything else. Schedule a date with yourself,
Nice.
for that self-care. I think that's so important, for self-care and just for your mental health altogether.
Right, for sure. So I added, of course, to the list plant medicine, but not just cannabis, other plant medicine too. I actually keep a little bottle of lemon essential oil. And if I'm feeling a little down, I put it in my hands, and
Oh, just the smell.
yeah, it lifts you right up. Citrus is so great for that.
I love the smell of citrus too, like if I'm cutting a lemon or anything like that. And I guess that kind of adds, I use teas,
Hmm.
even caffeine-free teas. I know
Hmm.
it sounds so hippy dippy that I'm like, oh, just trying teas. But it is something, it's warm, it's uplifting. And if you have some that have a little bit of caffeine in them, that's
Hmm.
amazing too. It's not so harsh as coffee can be. And
Right.
yeah, and it's another herb that can, they can add different things like that can uplift your spirits.
For sure. Yeah, and of course, psychedelics, there's lots of research now with microdosing mushrooms and that kind of
Yes.
thing. Great
Yeah.
success. And cannabis itself, for me, it's very uplifting. I try to choose strains that are more uplifting, and it definitely helps. Um,
Yes. And I also encourage you, if you are, and we've talked about this in the past episodes, if you're using it as a crutch to, take away the bad times, that can be rough on you. But to enhance your good moods,
mhm,
to know that like Wendy, when I just love it because you have that energy where, if you smoke, you're having a good time and you're feeling better about things. If that's
mhm.
the way, if that helps you and enhances your mood, my gosh, please do it. And make sure you're safe doing it. And it's such a great uplifting thing to be able to have a natural remedy.
Right. And I just love being able to figure out what I need and making those choices, in other years, when I would use pharmaceuticals for that, there's all the side effects, and I'm not really in charge of my own health. So that's
Yeah,
another thing that I really love about it.
that is
But
another thing. Those medications, they have other health side effects and things like that, and we all know that. Um,
mhm,
Wendy and I also know that some of those medications are needed
right.
to talk to your doctor about all these things. But yeah, that can also be a uh, very particular thing that can get you depressed in the first place is these medications, things like that, make you feel sick. Your body feels sick.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And Dr. Rosado goes into that. In fact, coming up next is my interview with Dr. Joseph Rosado. With over 4 decades of experience as a healthcare professional, Dr. Joseph Rosado, MD, is also one of the world's most respected authorities on cannabis as a plant-based medicine. Welcome to the show, Dr. Rosado.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
Oh, it's great to see you. So today's show is about depression, and I was kind of looking around for some statistics because I know it's fairly prevalent out there here in the United States, probably in the world actually. And I found this. according to the National Institute of Mental Health, in 2017, 7.1% of the population aged 18 and older was suffering from major depression. And also, it's highest in those 18 to 29 years old at 21%, followed by ages 45 to 64. And it seems that women suffer more from depression than men. And so when we use that word depression, we're not just talking about sad feelings. What exactly is depression?
Well, there's different types of depression, and it's defined based on symptomatology, but also length of time with which you've been dealing with. And so, for example, my stepfather passed away in March of last year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And
Gosh.
my mom just turned 82 a couple of weekends ago.
Mhm.
And she is just now experiencing the sense of loneliness and grief, because initially when he passed away, she had so much support from family, friends, and people coming around and visiting that she really didn't notice much. But now, as time has gone, on, and she's gone through the holiday season by herself, now the grief and depression is really affecting her. And the depression caused by grief, they say that it lasts 3 to 6 months, but they've been married since 1980,
Right.
and they've known each other since 1974, 73, 74. So to say that your spouse of 40 years just dies,
Mhm.
and you're only going to be quote unquote depressed for 3 to 6 months is really unrealistic.
I agree.
So
Mhm.
so you have to take every case, everything on a case by case basis, and determine, whether it's pathological and it's affecting their activities of daily living, if they're not, eating, if they're not bathing, if they're not socializing, if they're not going out, which that's not the case for my mom, for example. When I go there, yes, she's depressed, she's sad, and when I leave, I see her demeanor change. But it's not that, she's not bathing, she's not taking care of herself. The house, it hasn't become a buried alive, hoarder type situation.
Right.
But so it depends on the situation and the circumstances.
So in that case, when should people seek help? When does it get to a point where this is depression, it's a disease, and you really need to find some help?
When it gets to the point where they are no longer able to participate in life as we know it,
Okay.
they do not get out of bed, or they do not take the clothes that they sleep with off, or do not leave the house, or are in a constant state of funk, or just inability to engage in any activity. I've heard stories of individuals that for weeks and months, all they did was, lay in bed and watch TV. Sometimes they don't even watch TV. They're going through their cell phone. Sometimes not even that. They're just sitting there or laying there in a state of, almost incoherent, because they're just so overwhelmed with the level of depression and the thought processes that are controlling and dominating them.
Right. So, in the US, frequently physicians that, go right to use of antidepressants, right? So let's talk a little bit about that and whether that's really a treatment that is the best course of action, and how do they work too? I know they're all different, so that's a big question. But
The most commonly used antidepressants are the SSRIs. These are the serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They have found that when serotonin levels are low, that people tend to experience high levels of depression. And so the purpose of these medications is for the body to not utilize or allow for levels of serotonin to be a little higher,
Mhm.
and keep them from dropping, and by keeping them from dropping, it will ward off or fight off depression. The challenge with a lot of these medications, this specific class of medication, or the SSRIs, is that they usually take about 2 weeks before you actually see an effect. And it's a lot of trial and error. You start with one medication, tell the patient to come back in 2 to 4 weeks. You have them keep a log in a journal to see how they're doing. When they come back after 2 to 4 weeks, if they come back, and now you go into, so how are you doing? The most common side effect of antidepressants is depression, followed by suicidal ideation, followed by decreased libido or decreased sexual drive. Some antidepressants, for example, Paxil, causes anorgasmia in women and erectile dysfunction in men. Now, if you're depressed, and the one thing that you have going for you is your, somewhat of a healthy sexual appetite, or some type of a sexual relationship with your significant other, now all of a sudden you're depressed, and this medication is further worsening or taking away the one little bit of enjoyment that you have in life, which is your sexual relationship with your significant other. Now all of a sudden you're looking at a greater sense of, depression. Some people talk about becoming apathetic, where they have zero emotion. When they're on these antidepressants, it just makes flat and stoic, and they're unable to engage in any type of emotion, for lack of a better description.
Right.
The other type or class are the SNRIs, which are serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. These work on norepinephrine, which is a hormone that's produced in the adrenal glands, 2 small glands that sit just above the kidneys, hence suprarenal or adrenal, renal being referring to kidney. So it's in the area of the kidneys. That produces epinephrine, norepinephrine. And so this medication is a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor in conjunction with a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Examples of that are Effexor. I'm using the common names because people tend to know those better. So Effexor, Cymbalta, Pristiq are examples of that class of medication. There are other antidepressants that work on other receptors in the brain to offset the depression and address them. Studies have been done for years now in many of the Ivy League schools, utilizing an anesthetic that causes dissociative properties known as ketamine. Ketamine I used to use when I was in training, when we would do DNCs in women that had spontaneous abortions or miscarriages, and you needed to go in and perform a DNC to clean out the cervix, then uterus. And so they would give them this medication, and it was a relatively fast anesthetic, but at certain dosages, it causes a dissociative state and works as an NMDA inhibitor. It's a specific channel in the brain, and it has been used for treatment-resistant depression as well as suicidal ideations. And the protocol that's utilized is the Yale protocol, which comes from Yale University, where they treat these individuals twice a week for 3 weeks. And they have found that 95% of people that undergo this treatment go into remission for their depression.
Let's move forward and talk a little bit about cannabis and plant medicine. Do you feel that use of cannabis might be a better choice for some people, and how does it work?
Well, we have endocannabinoid receptors in our body. We have an endocannabinoid system. So before we speak on how cannabis works, we need to understand that we have receptors in our body, just like the receptors that we mentioned briefly earlier, we talked about the serotonin receptors, we talked about serotonin, we talked about norepinephrine receptors, we talked about NMDA. And so we also have cannabinoid receptors. These receptors are receptors where cannabis works on our, within our body. Now, understand that we produce cannabinoids in our body that work on these receptors. Not the same structures as THC, which is the most commonly known and understood phytocannabinoid, phyto meaning plant, cannabinoid meaning that it works on the cannabinoid receptors. So you have a phytocannabinoid, which is a cannabinoid that comes from the plant. But then you also have the endocannabinoids, and these are the cannabinoids that are formed in our body. The first one was discovered in 1992 called anandamide. So you can tell that this science and the discovery of these receptors is relatively new. 1992 was when I graduated from chiropractic school in Marietta, Georgia. So it's not been that long ago. And then 5 years later, due to the frustration, limited scope of practice, I went to medical school and became a medical doctor. So the use of cannabis has been used for anxiety, for depression. Many of my colleagues are of the belief that, if they use cannabis, it's going to make them more depressed because they think that cannabis is a downer. What they forget to understand is that phytocannabinoids have different reactions in our bodies. We also have a component called terpenes in the plants. These terpenes are what give the plant the smell and taste. So you have some terpenes that have a smell like citrus, which is called limonene. You have others that smell like pine, called pinene. So there's different types of terpenes, and all together, the terpenes together with the phytocannabinoids, you get what our Professor Raphael Mechoulam, who is the pioneer in this space, talks about the entourage effect. An entourage effect is when you get all of these substances working together, kind of like an orchestra in our bodies working on these different receptors. And by working on these different receptors, it allows for different sensations to take place. And so for this reason, cannabis can help with depression. And we've found that we can take people off of the traditional antidepressants and allow them to just use the cannabis, which has minimal to no side effects. And people are able to enjoy life much more so by utilizing the cannabis than by using these traditional conventional antidepressants.
And they don't have that same, the side effect of depression and suicidal ideation from the pharmaceutical drugs that you mentioned. We don't get that with cannabis. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, ma'am. That is accurate.
And so I know I've interviewed you before and had you explain how it actually works, why it works for depression. And I'd love for you to do that today as well.
Sure. So when we talked about the production of endocannabinoids are produced when we experience some type of stress. Now, it doesn't have to be a negative or an adverse stress like anxiety, depression, anger, pain, etc. It can be a good stressor, such as exercise or an orgasm. Any type of stress will cause an action potential. That action potential, what that does is it's like an electrical charge that makes its way down a neuron or a nerve cell that's found. So let's imagine that my two fingers, one is a presynaptic neuron, and this one is the postsynaptic neuron. And they're called that way because between the two is what's called a synaptic cleft. It's a connection. And so when the action potential starts at the presynaptic neuron, it works its way down, makes its way to the synaptic cleft. At that area, at the presynaptic neuron, there are channels and causes a stimulation and a release of sodium, potassium, calcium, crossing the synaptic cleft And at the postsynaptic neuron, it causes the releasing of the endocannabinoids. The two most commonly known endocannabinoids are anandamide, which I mentioned earlier, and 2-AG. They're produced at the postsynaptic neuron, and they move retrograde or in a backward direction to the presynaptic neuron, where the CB1 receptors and CB2 receptors are located. And these endocannabinoids go back and work on these specific receptors. Now, between the pre and postsynaptic neurons, you have enzymes that are lurking around. One is called FAAH, fatty acid amide hydrolase, FAAH, also known as FA, and the other is MAGL. Each one of these attacks the two endocannabinoids. So FA attacks the anandamide, and MAGL attacks the 2-AG and cuts their lifespan. Now, phytocannabinoids, two specific phytocannabinoids, act to deactivate the action of the FA and the MAGL. The phytocannabinoid that attacks the FA is CBD, and the phytocannabinoid that attacks the MAGL is THCV. And by going in and taking in these phytocannabinoids from the plant, CBD and THCV, it blocks these adverse reactions of these two enzymes, and it allows for the full expression of the endocannabinoid system. Now, as we get older, or if we're under an inordinate amount of stress, now, anandamide is called the bliss endocannabinoid because it comes from the Sanskrit word ananda, which means bliss. So it's the bliss endocannabinoid. That's how you're supposed to feel. So as we get older, we produce less endocannabinoids. So for this reason, we need cannabinoids from the outside, or exogenous, from outside in, to work on these receptors.
I love it. The word anandamide is bliss. So how can it not help with depression, right? It seems like it was just built for us, and we're built for it, I guess, for people who are listening and watching, as we said in the beginning, the depression is so prevalent. People are going to their doctors and talking about it. Most of them are not trained and know what you described, how the medicine works for depression. What can they do? I know even at the doctor's office, they're testing people now to figure out which antidepressant works with their body, which is a little better than the trial and error we had before. But it sounds like these drugs don't really do the full job where cannabis could for many people.
I mean, I've heard Professor Hanush, who was the gentleman that named the first endocannabinoid and wrote the foreword to my book, Hope and Healing, the Case for Cannabis. But from stage, he has stated himself, cannabis doesn't work for everybody. So, I don't want the message to be muddied or muddled, and people think that, cannabis is a panacea and it works all the time.
Right.
It doesn't always work, and it doesn't always work the same way on everybody. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it's an individualized medicine, and so we must treat it that way, and we must be conscious of that. So
are there lifestyle changes that people can add in? I know, when people are depressed, you described the symptoms in the beginning. It's hard to get going to make some changes that might help. But once they're on whatever type of medicine they choose, what kinds of things can they do? Are there diet changes, or what would you recommend?
There's some plant medicines that are being studied and investigated, such as mushrooms. And there are certain states in the United States that have decriminalized and or legalized the use of mushrooms for the treatment of depression. And there have been articles in a lot of the mainstream journals out there, Newsweek, Time, etc.
Mhm. Yeah, I have used psilocybin myself, microdosed, and it's very interesting. Microdosing for a short time, it seems to last for a really long time, even when would stop microdosing. I think there's a lot of hope in that. What do you think?
Well, it's plant medicine. And so we have those same receptors in our bodies that work. There are some,
Mhm.
cannabis physicians that also push and promote the use of microdosing of cannabis, two of which are Dr. Ethan Rousseau and Dr. Dustin Sulak, that
Mhm.
both have, been very verbal and in teaching and educating using 2.5 milligrams of cannabis 2 to 3 times a day,
Mhm.
and progressively increase, titrate to effect. But they want everyone to be on at least 2.5 milligrams 2 to 3 times a day, because they feel that that's sufficient to stimulate the endocannabinoid system.
Wow. So much progress. It's good to hear. And and that microdosing, a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to get high, right? It's a side effect of the medicine, right? So by microdosing, maybe they don't have to deal with that side effect so much if that's not what they're looking for.
Well, the thing is that when you have clinical endocannabinoid deficiency that's causing post-traumatic stress disorder or fibromyalgia symptoms or bipolar disorder or anxiety, depression, etc., you need so much cannabis to maintain your levels at a therapeutic index.
Mhm.
And so the probability of you being high or stoned is minimal to none, because it's medicine and you're taking enough medicine to offset the effects of whatever pathology you've got.
Very good point. Oh, this has been fantastic. Where can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Sure. They can go to my website, www.josephrosadomd.com. That's josephrosadomd.com. If they want to send me an email, they can go to, they send an email to info@josephrosadomd.com, info@josephrosadomd.com. I am on Instagram, Dr. Joseph Rosado, Dr. Joseph Rosado. I'm on LinkedIn, Joseph Rosado MD MBA, Joseph Rosado MD MBA. So those are the main places where you can find me.
Excellent. And if you could mention your book one more time as well, that would be great.
Sure. It's Hope and Healing, The Case for Cannabis. It's available on Amazon. Uh, on Kindle, it's $5. Paperback, it's $20. Hardcovers, $30. It's also available at Barnes and Noble, as well as Roku. So there's different areas where you can purchase the book.
Excellent and affordable for anyone, really. That's
Yeah, I mean,
wonderful.
$5 for a Kindle book, you
Yeah,
can't beat it.
you can't beat it, and it's great information. Thanks so much for joining me.
Always a pleasure speaking and meeting with you.
Miss Teddy here with your Food is Medicine Minute. We are talking about changing your lifestyle and helping with depression. And I am a big believer that changing the way you eat can help your state of mind and help you live a healthy, happy life. There are some foods that make you feel really, really good when you are indulging in them, but these foods can actually cause depression in the long run. And these are processed foods, artificial sweeteners, refined sugar, high sodium foods, hydrogenated oils, alcohol, caffeine, dairy, GMOs and conventional food, and fast food. All these, like I said, these really make you feel good while you're indulging in them. They can cause depression in the long run. They cause inflammation and body aches and just all around make you feel bad in the long run. For more information on Food is Medicine, please feel free to contact me at Learn From Teddy on Facebook. Thank you.
I'm outside! I'm standing outside! I'm outside.
I'm outside. We are both outside.
Well, that was some great information about depression and about how cannabis works for depression. And also, I just love Miss Teddy, and it's great that she offered information about foods to avoid if you're trying to avoid depression.
And I watch her all the time anyways with the foods that she cooks. I saw her earlier this week doing some cool, videos of showing some healthy options for food. So it's always good with Teddy. And obviously her funny TikTok videos. You can't pass those up.
You guys have bonded over TikTok, I feel.
She's absolutely crazy awesome. It's so fun to, I just started TikTok with this show. So having some guidance in what Teddy does with some funny things, it's been a lot of fun. She's ridiculous. So it's just hilarious.
So what have you been watching this week?
I've been taking to task. You have asked me to hey, watch some stuff. So I've been watching things. And I found a movie that I think slipped through the cracks, at least in my world. It's a movie called Paul, Paul, Paul.
Just Paul.
Just Paul. And it's about an alien that has, and apparently it's this alien that's been around forever. The generic alien that you see on, sci-fi movies.
Oh, yeah. The green man, like the green with the big eyes.
The green man. This is him, and apparently it's because they've been the FBI, the FBI has been trying to slowly wean us into, hey, this is an alien that we're going to see eventually someday. This guy ends up getting escaping and actually hijacking an RV with these other people. I don't know if you've seen Shaun of the Dead. Have you seen that movie?
Oh my gosh, a long time ago. Yeah.
So the actors that are in Shaun of the Dead are the main characters in it as well. And the alien voice, it's like a cartoon or CGI, is Seth Rogen.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
He's a stoner alien. It was, crying, laughing half the movie. Some of the quotes are absolutely just ridiculous. And I'm giving this one 2 buds way up.
Wow, 2 buds.
Way up. It was so amazing, so funny, and just a really good, uplifting movie. So if you're into doing something this weekend, maybe watching a cool movie that just slipped through the cracks, Paul.
Yes.
Paul is it.
All right. I'm going to have to check that out. I may have to use my medicine beforehand. I'm not sure.
Definitely. And you can also go, smoke for smoke with the alien if you like. He lights up a lot during the movie. So.
Oh, okay. So every time he lights up, I could light up. That would be really fun.
Yeah, you might be able to go that way.
I love it. Well, coming up next, Dr. Brian Nickel will pair a cannabis strain with our musical guest.
I'm Dr. Brian Nickel, your cannabis expert for CannabisExpertMD.com, with a music and cannabis pairing for the Wendy Love Ed Show. Wendy's musical guest this week is Cameron Johnson. He's from Bentonville, Arkansas. Cameron's got 2 EPs under his belt. They are appropriately named EP1 that was released in 2019. That was followed by EP2, of course. I listened to Is There a Difference from the EP1 set. Now, it's a very, very well-produced, simple song with a very country vibe to it. It is really Cameron with his rich, strong voice and acoustic guitar. He's backed up by a very talented electric guitar player and backup vocalist. It's a slow country genre song about the differences in perception, how the differences tend to divide us. For this, I was looking for a very relaxing strain to help you chill to Cameron's observations of the difficulties of being human. For this, I selected, based on the cannabinoid and terpene profile available to me, as I always do, Natural State Medicinal's Purple Sunset. Purple Sunset is potent at 24% total THC. A little bit of trace CBD is present. Looking at the terpenes, it is potent at 2.2%, myrcene dominant at 1.44%. Beta-caryophyllene is up next at 0.33, with limonene at 0.18, linalool at 0.16, and humulene at 0.1%. Now, Purple Sunset, this should give you a pretty quick cerebral effect with the combination of the THC and the myrcene speeding the euphoric effects. The beta-caryophyllene, that can help tame down a little bit of depression you may be having, and the limonene will help with some anxiety and give just a little bit of a mood lift. Then the myrcene combines with the linalool to provide a very, very chill, relaxing, and somewhat sedating effect. The little bit of humulene in there might keep you out of the chip bag. Now, Purple Sunset, this should be just as strange to enjoy watching the sunset and listening to Cameron Johnson as the sun fades away, as do we all, and contemplate his question. For more information on all things medical cannabis, check us out at cannabisexpertmd.com. We're also available on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Cannabis Expert MD. Now I present to you Cameron Johnson with Is There a Difference?
Is there a difference between right and wrong? 'Cause I'm the last one standing while everyone's gone. When I've lacked for words, I sang you a song. Tell me what is the difference between right and wrong? 'Cause we're fading day by day. We're slowly but surely we're on our way. Between all the seasons, most things will change. I'm here, then you're gone, and we're not the same. Is there a difference between me and you? We look out the same window and see a different view. It's such a shame when we have to choose. Tell me what is the difference between me and you? 'Cause we're fading day by day. We're slowly but surely we're on our way.
Hold your breath. Make a wish. Count to 3. Come with me, and you'll be.
Hi, I'm Candis Dyer.
And I'm Wendy Love Edge.
And this is Mile High News.
Well, Candice, what are we talking about today in cannabis news?
Man, the Super Bowl. I know everybody had to be on edge this weekend, whether you like the Super Bowl or not. The halftime show was amazing and you were wanting to watch that. So, man, it was a great game.
Yeah, I know. I am not much for sports or for football, but I always want to tune in for the halftime show. And this year, especially since it was a hip hop show.
Yes, I was so excited to hear about the performers. Man, I love every one of them. The Los Angeles Rams and the Cincinnati Bengals played, and the Rams won 23-20 for the first time in 22 years.
It's amazing. I know everyone was so excited, and what a great game. Everyone has still been talking about it, and still talking about the halftime show for sure. So who performed in the halftime show?
We have Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, Kendrick Lamar, and 50 Cent.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the commercials, because there were some cannabis commercials that kind of popped up, and one played and one didn't. So let's talk about the one that played.
Yes, the one that played was Willie Nelson. Everybody knows that Willie is a big cannabis supporter. And he did some innuendos, I guess you would say, in the commercial. It was a Skechers commercial, and it was talking about the comfort of the shoes, but you could just tell the little hints on cannabis legalization in there. And that one got to play.
Yeah, he was very clever. I think it got to play because of it being just innuendo and not, right on the nose, even though we all know what he was talking about. For sure.
And then we had the weed map one, and that was a little bit more not so subtle, which I guess is probably why that they weren't allowed to play. But they have broccoli, just wanting to be broccoli, not a sign of weed, like when you're talking on Facebook or Instagram. We got to be so subtle with how we say cannabis. So people use a green heart emoji or a Christmas tree for, some people use broccoli. So
right. I know it took me a minute. I actually had to ask you about it because I have never used broccoli to represent cannabis. But once you said it, I was like, oh, right.
Right.
But that ad, watching that ad, I was kind of like, they talked about hotboxing the copy room and the universal sign, right? So I can see why they chose not to roll that one. But why is it that we can't advertise for cannabis? It's legal in so many states.
Yes, it's the federal. I think we realize that it's the federal legalization, and once that happens, then more things are going to be able to go out in the open. But the NFL is being a lot more pro cannabis than they used to be. They're not so much drug testing for cannabis anymore, which is a great point.
For sure, you're right. And I saw that they have they made the levels higher that people can have on their drug test for cannabis, for THC, and it also said that they're not suspending players anymore, even if they're at the higher limit.
Just being a little bit more lenient about it, but
right. It's still an illicit drug in the eyes of the federal government, so that I think that's the issue.
Unfortunately.
But what I didn't think was news that has made news everywhere was Snoop Dogg, using cannabis prior to his performance. What are your thoughts about that? Yeah.
Imagine that, Snoop Dogg smoking weed.
Exactly.
It was hilarious, man. And the thing is that he actually had it in his hand the whole performance.
You pointed that out to me. I did not notice that, but that's hilarious. But it's legal in California. He's just using a legal substance in his home state, and I don't know why that's news.
I think it's awesome though, just for the fact that it's bringing attention. Like, to other people, you know, that don't normally talk about cannabis every day like us cannabis activists do.
Right.
So it's reaching more people that way. You know what I
That's
mean?
true.
Being something talked about. So, but yeah, it's not news. Like everybody knows Snoop smokes.
But thank you, Snoop, because you're right. It helps to normalize it, you know? I mean, we talk about cannabis all the time, but that's not representative of, you know, everyone in the country.
Right.
So I think it does. I think you're right. It does help to normalize it.
For sure. And then just the fact that Eminem had 14 years clean, Mary J. Blige had 11 years clean, both repping sobriety between the two of them, 25 years of recovery time. That's amazing. I love that too.
Yes, I do too. That's fantastic. So just so many great things about the halftime show. I think if people haven't seen it, you can catch it on YouTube. You can find it on social media. Definitely check it out.
For sure, for sure. And big shout out to Mary and Eminem for their time of sobriety and showing people that you can be an addict and still get up there on stage later and come back just as good as before and sober. And it can happen and it does work. And
yes, great point.
This has been Mile High News with Candis Dyer
and Wendy Lovett.
Stay lit, everyone.
Looks aren't that important, just icing on the cake. What really turns me on is the shake. Shake it to the left, shake it to the right. Come on, baby, you know what I like.
Well, it's been a really great show. Do you have any final thoughts, Branden?
Well, I want everyone to know, just like we started with this, that you're not alone when it comes to depression. Everyone has highs and lows in life, and we got to deal with them. And that's what you got to do. You got to face it. And so when you're feeling really low, you got to think about those things that make you happiest. And so I encourage you to go out and do those things. Make that routine. Part of your routine is to feel better, to make yourself feel better. So eating right, or just doing things that make you feel good is a big part of getting out of a depression. And surround yourself with people that you love and that love you and that care about you. And I promise that things will always get brighter.
For sure. You know, depression is a serious illness. And if you are having suicidal thoughts, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The number is 800-273-8255. And I agree with everything you said, Branden. You know, we're all in this together. We're here to be happy, I believe.
Yes.
But the other side of that is that this is a very real illness. And when it does crop up and you're having the symptoms, you know, you're not interested in the things that you used to really love, or having trouble sleeping and all of those things, it's really important to you know, look at some of the things we mentioned at the beginning of the show, or possibly, you know, adding some medication. We're not doctors, but I think we provided some really good information, and Dr. Rosado definitely did as well.
For sure. Reach out and know that people do care about you. Even in those darkest moments, know that they do care about you, and we want you around. You know, once if it gets to that certain point, you know, it's there's another day, you know, so know that it keeps going. We want you around, and that there are people and doctors and other people that want you to be healthy and happy. So definitely take those steps to do so.
Absolutely. Well, I hope everyone has a great week. Bye. The Wendy Lovett Show is sponsored in part by Caris Healthcare, the Relevant app, Lit Premium Smoking Supplies, 131 Inclusion Gallery, Irie Bliss Wellness, The Bomb Cannabis Body Care, Lindsay Camp, and Synergy One Lending.